Are you frustrated, even angry with the answers you're receiving to your pressing biblical questions? Are you hungry for some straight-talking biblical truth? Welcome into Igniting a Nation's Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. We're not afraid to tackle these issues and find the answers. Call us now at 850-660-9595. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker.
Shalom, shalom. Good morning to all of you. It is wonderful to be with you on this beautiful Wednesday morning, August the 24th, 2022. Lots of things are happening, and we are delighted to have you with us live and in person every Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here for this live edition of Revealing the Truth. We're going to do the Prophecy edition, part 2. As a couple of stories have been on my radar, but I wanted to really emphasize them today. I kind of messed up the schedule. I readily admit that that was my doing, and yesterday was supposed to be a different program, but yet I prepared for a prophecy program for then. And yesterday was election day, and so that was an important event in my life, as I have been a regular voter and believe that that is one of the constitutional rights that we have to be able to change this country, rather than just complain about this country, to be able to make some changes. So we welcome you in to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we talk about the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. This is a live call-in show, and the phone lines are open at 850-660-9595. Now, don't be shy about calling in. You don't have to have an eloquent statement that you want to make about what it is that we're talking about. If you've got a prayer need, if you are right now struggling in a particular area, something you've been wrestling with, maybe for a family member, maybe for yourself, maybe you don't want to be specific about who it's for, but you have a prayer need and you need to have that Aaron and her lifting up your arms kind of experience, then that's what we're here for. We're not just here to talk about what we talk about, which are the headlines or the heart lines, those things that affect our lives, or biblical examples and stories that I share with you. But it's really to be part of your extended family, extended community, body of Messiah. And I know that many churches have done away with prayer teams and prayer lines and the ability to call and get prayer. So many of you may not have a prayer partner. Let us become that prayer partner with you and that prayer partner for you. I think it's important that you have an outlet to be able to share those prayer requests and those prayer needs. And that's exactly what I love to do, is to minister and to minister to you through the Word of God. So give me a call. Let's talk about what's on your heart, mind, or spirit. Again, the number is 850-660-9595. Now, these 2 hours, the 8 a.m., 10 a.m., live Monday through Friday, are just a small part of the 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week programming on our station, where you can listen on iHeartRadio, the Igniting a Nation apps on Google and on Apple, and the ignitinganation.com website. These 2 hours are simulcast on all social media, so you can watch and listen. So if you are a subscriber to YouTube or to LinkedIn, to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of the social media sites, the mainstream social media sites carry this live simulcast on the Igniting a Nation page, as well as on the personal Eric Walker page. So you get plenty of opportunity to be able to watch and to listen. The programs throughout the day are teachings and sermons given over the past 20 years. If you're interested in the full series or a particular teaching, visit the Biblical Truth Library on our website where you can acquire the entire teaching. Or if you just want the video of a particular teaching, then go to our YouTube channel. There's over 3,750 videos on our channel. Many of them had to do with the a little over 5 years of television that we did interviewing some of the most prolific and wonderful authors that you can possibly imagine. And we have all of that available to you. You can get an app which will download or grab a clip from YouTube. And if you want to use it for a teaching series of your own that you want to use at your church or at your small group, I want to encourage you to feel free to use it. The only thing we ask for is that you give the credit where credit is due, and that is to us, Igniting a Nation, and myself as the author. Other than that, there are no license fees, there's no charges, and we make that available to you so you may use it. It is for the equipping of the saints. We would not be able to bring you the rebirth of the highly successful TV program Revealing the Truth that ran for over 2,500 episodes. I'm not sure you really grasp how big that is, but Gunsmoke, which was the longest running series on television, didn't have that many more than 2,500 episodes. So that's a lot of television that we produced over a period of time. We ran Jason Ragged, and he was just magnificent. And all the authors, the publicists, the agents that we worked with were tremendous in scheduling really great, deep conversations about the particular topics that these authors were writing about. And we covered everything from Islam to the end times to caregiving to infertility. If there's a topic that is near and dear to your heart, you can do a topical lookup by the subject and find many of those interviews, and that may lead you to get the book, and that may be a life-changing experience for you. So we could not be here if it wasn't for the generosity of our faithful donors, you who continue to support the program with your offerings. That can be given on our donate page on our website or on our Facebook page. There's a donate button. And we encourage you, strongly encourage you to support not only this outlet, this media outlet, but our work in Kisii, Kenya, where we have the Igniting a Nation Worship Center. And I cannot emphasize enough what a joy that's been. Now, I have never been there, and I have not ever met Pastor Job Ezekiel or Sister Callister, but we are family. And this is what happens when you have a global reach with a ministry. And yes, there are really hundreds of people knocking on the door looking for money and for support. We're a very, very small ministry. You're looking at the ministry. We have a board who are actively engaged in other areas of corporate life, but the ministry is fully my 100% attention. And I met them and got to know them. And they were a small group of about 28 that were gathering together, and they found the teachings online and they began to follow them. And as they began to follow them, they began to share them. And as they began to share them, the community grew and people began to gather around to listen to the teachings. And now it's grown to about 175. We built the Igniting a Nation Worship Center. We're trying to get power to it, but that's very expensive. So we're looking at an alternative measure, and that is to acquire 2 acres of land and plant banana trees and grow the bananas, have the congregation members manage this enterprise, sell the bananas, use the bananas for food, sell the bananas to generate revenue, to get electricity to the congregation, to help provide for the building of housing for not these temporary dwellings, but more permanent housing, to get electricity to those houses, to help the widows and the orphans, and to make it a self-sustaining congregation. Now, this was the model that was used in Israel in 1948, the kibbutz, the model began long before that, beginning in the late 1800s, where it was a live, work, play, worship kind of environment. And this has become a community of family. And so if you'd like to support that work, please designate that on your contribution, and we will send 100% of what you give to support that work in Kisii, Kenya. We don't take any administrative charges. We're just not that big. We don't have that kind of giant overhead where it has to run through a lot of hands. Everything is handled through the business office, which is in Alabama. So it doesn't even come here. I don't handle any of the finances whatsoever. That's all handled and has been for the last 15 years by our great CPA, Steve Brown. So please continue to support us, or continue to support the work we're doing in Israel. And also, we have two wonderful sponsors here in the local market, the Don Burt team at Keller Williams Emerald Coast and Navarre Chiropractic Center. In both cases, I have personal experience, and Don Burt and her team helped me through every aspect of home acquisition imaginable over the past 3 years. Don and her team have been serving the needs of both military and civilian clients for many years and is loved by all. If you are even thinking about relocating to the beautiful Emerald Coast or considering a move of any kind in Northwest Florida, give Dawn and her team a call at 850-684-4284 and check them out online at Team Burt. That's B-U-R-T, teamburt.com. And of course, our great friends and my personal chiropractor at Navarre Chiropractic Center. This incredible team led by Dr. Laird Likens took me from 24 hours a day of debilitating neck pain to a pain-free life. Now, there are plenty of chiropractors out there, and then there's this team focused on a holistic approach that incorporates every technique from classical adjustment to acupuncture, heat therapy, traction, massage, and personal trainers to make sure you will get the best care possible. This full service practice should be your first stop after a car accident or any injury to your body. No insurance, no worries. They have a plan to accommodate any situation. Give them a call right now at 850-939-3339 and look them up online at NavarreChiropracticCenter.com. Yesterday was election day, the primaries. I voted. I was the only voter in the precinct. There were more campaign workers lining the street, waving their signs. More campaign workers inside handling the registration and the voting machines than there were voters. This is a concern that I've had, and one in which I believe we as believers are complicit in some of the direction this nation has taken. And so I found an article that I think will give us a great deal of insight. It says, will Christian complacency and apathy determine November midterms? Now, in the realm of prophecy, we look prophetically at what's going to line up scripturally. But as America changes, the world changes. And if our complacency and our apathy and our lack of participation in the exercising of our constitutional rights is not prophetic, I don't know what is, because God created government. If you have not ever heard my series on the Bible and government, I strongly encourage you to visit the website and download that series. You'll hear it play in the rotation of our 24/7 channel, but you won't hear it play in order. So you might hear part 2, part 4, part 7, and go back and forth. But in order to hear it in order, and the way it was presented, you need to go to the website, ignitinganation.com, and download that series. I strongly feel, and I'm strongly in agreement with this. And I have one more story out of Israel for you, and then I have another story which will take up most of the program, and it will talk about this fascinating question as to why Americans embrace Marxism and why socialism is just really maybe a decade away. So before classes began for the fall semester, the entire staff and faculty of Arizona Christian University gathered for 2 days of prayer and preparation. This is where my good friend George Barna heads up the research there. He originally had the Barna Group. Follow him. He is probably the greatest researcher of the modern era. And he heads up, and they do a quarterly release of the Worldview inventory, which I strongly suggest you go to their website at Arizona Christian University and sign up for it and read about it, because it's a survey of millennials. It's a survey of believers. It lets you know how many believers are embracing a biblical worldview, how many of your pastors embrace the biblical worldview, how many pray. The results are shocking. They really are shocking. So this event was called the All Hands Meeting, as in all hands on deck. The Navy call to action when everyone must be present to engage in the task at hand. The November 8th midterm elections represent an all hands on deck moment for biblical Christians in America. For many decades, Christians have felt they satisfied their citizen obligation by simply casting a ballot on election day. But the times have changed dramatically. Those votes were cast during an era when the government was legal and healthy, albeit sometimes misguided. And elections were generally fair and trustworthy. Those days are long gone. Corruption, deception, abuse of power, misuse of government funds, media collusion are the new political norm in America. Merely voting is no longer enough to ensure the security and extension of a safe country driven by the Constitution, rule of law, and biblical morality. If there is any hope of stabilizing and restoring our nation, we desperately need an all hands on deck commitment from biblical Christians between now and November. You might be surprised to learn how few devoted Christians actually participate in the election process beyond voting. Recent national research by the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University indicates that most of the devoted Christians in America typically add little value to the process beyond their vote. Those who do provide a service beyond voting generally take part in a single election-related pursuit. In an age where millions of voting records are being falsified, elections are being stolen, and government agencies are guilty of selective enforcement of the law, followers of Messiah cannot afford to sit on the sidelines and watch their country be destroyed from the inside out. Let's get more specific. A recent Cultural Research Center survey measured election participation in 8 ways. The complacency of the body of Christ, despite this time of urgency, is evident upon exploring the commitment of each of several key Christian segments. Among theologically defined born-again Christians, 1 out of 5 is not even registered to vote. I want to pause right there and let that sink in. 20% of theologically defined born-again Christians are not even registered to vote. I find that to be appalling. Now, I come from a different perspective than many of you because I've had to count the cost of being a believer. And I look at America maybe through a different lens than many of you who were born and raised here and come from a long history and a long lineage of Americans. But I don't. I represent the first post-Holocaust generation. And we had such close ties with our Eastern European families that we knew firsthand what this country offered to us in the form of opportunity. And even with all the persecution that we Jews have faced over the generations, we have gone on to become the judges, the lawyers, the doctors, the leaders in many communities, in the finance area, in the pharmaceutical area, in the technology area, in the entertainment fields. And we've been given opportunities that we would not have had there not been America. And so I'm proud to be an American. And I'm proud to embrace and hold by my side this little mini pocket version of the United States Constitution. And when you read the preamble, that we were devoted to creating a more perfect union. One out of 5 is not even registered to vote. That's 20% of theologically defined born-again Christians. Less than 1 out of every 4 volunteers to help a candidate, donates to a political campaign, participates in public demonstrations, or is willing to engage in civil disobedience. 1 out of 4 attempts to register unregistered adults as voters or to personally persuade another person to vote in a specific manner. Now, I volunteer in many areas within ministry, and I will tell you that I do not get involved in political campaigns. But I do talk with a lot of people about getting out to vote. And I think it's extremely important that we raise our children to become voters. We talk about it in our families, we talk about it in our congregations, and we talk about it from the pulpit. That this is your right. And if you want to protect these inalienable rights given to you, granted to you under God, then how are you going to protect them if you don't vote? Among theological conservative adults, both Protestant and Catholic, the profile is almost identical. 1 out of 5 is not registered to vote. So whether or not you're talking about evangelicals, whether or not you're talking about mainstream Protestant and mainstream denominations or mainstream Catholics, 20% of the believing population of America does not vote. So let me look up how many Christians are there in America? It says there's roughly 167 million. So 20% of that is 32, almost 33 million people, believers, that don't get out to vote. In almost every election, and especially in the presidential campaign past, those 32 million votes would have gone a long way to change the course of what we are dealing with now, 2 years later. Less than 1 out of every mainstream Protestant and Catholics volunteer for a political candidate or campaign, or donate money to a political campaign, or participate in public demonstrations, or are willing to engage in civil disobedience. 1 out of 4 attempts to register unregistered adults as voters. 1 out of every 3 attempts to personally persuade someone to vote for a specific candidate or initiative. I don't hear people talking about the issues. Oh, the surveys do, and we seem to depend on Fox News or Newsmax or whatever it is, media outlet that we depend on to find out what's important to people. But in your community, what's important to you? In your family, what's important for you as you consider your children and your grandchildren? My parents cared about the country they were leaving to their children. I believe the Jewish community at large is devoted to being good citizens. I know that my Christian brothers and sisters want the best for America, but for 20% of the body of Christ in America to not even be registered to vote, has got to be so unsettling when you hear this. Among adults who attend an evangelical church, the behavior patterns are again similar. 1 out of 6 is not registered to vote. Not a big difference. Less than 1 out of every 4 volunteers to assist a candidate, donates to a political campaign, tries to register unregistered adults as voters, participates in public demonstrations, or is willing to engage in civil disobedience. 3 out of every 10 attempt to personally persuade people to vote for a specific candidate or initiative, so that number is literally triple. Even among integrated disciples, adults who possess a biblical worldview, commitment to political engagement is sorely lacking and is eerily similar to that of the previously described Christian niches. 1 out of 7 has not bothered to register to vote. Less than 1 out of every 4 volunteers to help a candidate, donates to a political campaign, seeks to register unregistered adults as voters, takes part in a public demonstration, or is willing to engage in civil disobedience. Slightly more than 1 out of 3 engages in trying to persuade someone to vote for a specific candidate or initiative. We're going to take a short break right now. And we're going to pick this back up on the other side of the break, because there's a lot more to this story than I think you understand and I think you realize. And we have an opportunity between now and November for you and I to change the course of direction of this country just by getting that 20% to register to vote and getting them out to vote. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
We'll be right back with more Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker right after this commercial break.
People People do some pretty cool things in their 40s and 50s. Why should saving for retirement be any different? I mean, they go back to college, learn new instruments, start skateboarding.
Whoa!
Okay, maybe that one's not for everybody, but saving for retirement is. With aceyourretirement.org, you can get on track with your retirement savings no matter your age. Just have a 3-minute chat with Avo, the friendly digital retirement coach from AARP. You'll get personalized recommendations based on your input that are easy to understand and work with your lifestyle. It's quick, easy, and free. Plus, it's sponsored by AARP, so you know they got your back.
Woohoo! Gnarly move, Dad.
Thanks, sweetie.
So wherever you are in your retirement savings journey, head to aceyourretirement.org and start chatting with Avo today. That's aceyourretirement.org. A message from AARP and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I got to tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
In the Garden of Eden, God spoke his first prophecy. Not much has been said or written about the eternal impact of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. What if every prophecy, and even Jesus' return, was tied to this prophecy and no one ever told you? Now you have a chance to read for yourself Rabbi Eric's latest book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy, featured on Skywatch TV. This book is a must-read. Get your copy at Amazon or from Skywatch TV. And don't forget to order The Codist, Rabbi Eric's prophetic biblical thriller, exposing a diabolical plot to weaponize your DNA. And while you're at it, get his book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls at 850-660-9595.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we talk about the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're having a discussion about voting, about our role as believers. And as I'm dealing with some of this data, I want to emphasize who we are as defined by God as believers. We are a people set apart. We're not to be like the rest of the world. So apathy, complacency, non-involvement is not the calling of a believer. How can we be effective for the kingdom if we are not engaged in our communities? How can we be involved in our country in maintaining any kind of godly foundation if we, the believers, are not taking the lead? This is tantamount to saying, I'm going to yield the direction of this country to Bernie Sanders or to Ben and Jerry. As a believer, it's incumbent upon you to stand against injustice, to maintain moral integrity. And if that simply means voting, that's the minimum requirement, and 20% of believers are not even registered to vote. Now, does that mean you're going to die and go to hell because you're not registered to vote? No. But I guarantee you that you who are not registered to vote are sitting around complaining about the gas prices, and are complaining about the food prices, and are complaining about the LGBT confusion and conversation and narrative and where is this country headed? And you're not even registered to vote. And for those of you who are registered to vote, we're doing very little above and beyond that. We're leaving it to other people. And because we're leaving it to other people to run this country, we're not electing people that share our same values. Well, you say a conservative, Bible-believing Christian can't get elected. Well, last I checked, most of the people who run for election are churchgoers. Why have we been taken on the role of being the tail as opposed to the head that God called us to be? It doesn't compute in my mind. Yes, I went to little tiny Holly Assembly of God that hosted the polling place. Tiny little church, lovely people. And I was impressed that even in front of this tiny little precinct, I live in a community of 1,941 people. That's the population. And there had to be 15 or 20 young people lined up, holding up campaign signs for their candidate. Now, I know many of you have been complaining about the direction the youth want to take us in, but they're the ones who are involved in these political campaigns. These are the ones who are active. And we don't know, but based on these statistics, we can be fairly certain that many of them are not believers. So you know that either you serve the Lord or you serve the enemy. Bob Dylan said it best. You got to serve somebody. You either got to serve the Lord or you got to serve the enemy. And it's incumbent upon us that we take seriously. Listen, the price that was paid for you is no small price. It was the life of Messiah. And how much do we take for granted? Well, I'm busy. I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. But yet, you'll complain about the impact of gas prices and the inflation rate and how your dollar doesn't go as far, and you're concerned about your savings, and you don't know what's going to happen to your children and to your grandchildren and to the future of this nation, but you're not doing anything about it. The Bible talks about That very thing. Your friend comes to you hungry, and you know he's hungry, and you say, God bless you, and you send him away with your blessing, but you don't put food in his belly. We have to get engaged and involved in our communities. I was very fortunate to have a very close friend and supporter that was part of the State House of Representatives in Alabama. And we were able to talk about issues, and we were able to exchange ideas, and he had questions, and I gave him my opinions, and he sought out my counsel and presented me with a beautiful plaque from the Alabama House of Representatives on the day that Alabama passed the resolution recognizing Israel's state to be an independent country. Faith and politics are not in opposition to each other. But we've become apathetic and complacent. Perhaps the most striking realization is that when it comes to faith and politics, even our showcase niche has a lot of room for growth. These spiritually active, governance engaged, conservative Christians may be defined by engagement in both spiritual and political matters, but they bear more in common than in contrast with the other Christian segments just detailed. By definition, they are registered to vote, but they take that privilege seriously. More than 90% of them have voted in each of the last 4 national elections, presidential and midterm, far surpassing the levels of the other Christian segments listed above. Reflecting their political awareness and spiritual commitment, this group called sages are 3 times more likely than other believers to say they're committed to participating in civil disobedience if necessary. They are about 40% more likely to spend time researching the candidates and initiatives that will appear on their ballot. But what about those others in between indicators of engagement? Sage conservatives are only half as likely as the national average to volunteer in a political campaign, 10%. Although they're substantially better informed politically and are much more likely to have a biblical worldview, or at least to know the Bible well, barely more than 1/3 of them invest in persuading other individuals they know to vote in a specified way. So the old adage was you don't talk about sex and politics and religion. But the time has come for us to change that paradigm and to start talking about politics and religion again. Because we are headed into a period of time that my life may end during those years, but the changes I'm seeing give me concern for the welfare of our children and of our grandchildren. And with 20% of the believers not even registered to vote, I can understand non-believers. I can understand those that want to use the system any way they want and they don't want things to change. But we as believers who want to see Roe v. Wade overturned, we want to see prayer return to school, we want to see God included, we want to see God's definition of marriage upheld. But for 20% of us to not even get out and not even be registered to vote, that doesn't even mean that just because you're registered to vote, you actually do vote. It seems that sometimes conservatives are in danger of being like the boy who cried wolf, too often turning the ears of his tribe deaf to his pleas for help when such action was truly needed. As I look at the state of our country today during the time of government-driven oppression, persecution, deception, disunity, and redefinition, I do not believe that begging the true church to stand strong and long is either ill-timed or overreaching. If we do not stand this November, we may not have the chance again. And standing in November means more than simply voting and carrying out some other non-strenuous election-related effort. This is a season for intensity, diligence, solidarity, sacrifice, and intercession. Now, this is an article originally published at the Washington Stand and is being used with permission. There is a clarion call going out for the body of Messiah to rise up to take this country back. And yes, the media is controlled by the liberals, but the pulpits are not. And if they are, that should not be so. And if you know the story, and I've referred to it many times, the American Revolution, the British were not afraid of the colonists and the colonial army. They were afraid of what they called the Black Robe Regimen. Look it up. Do the research. It was the pastors that were influencing the people to rise up and stand against oppression. Do you not think that during the period of time in which the temple stood in Jerusalem, that the leaders were not meeting and talking with the people about how to stand up against Rome? Yes, there was this laissez-faire, peaceful coexistence for a period of time. But after the destruction of the Second Temple, the rebellion that took place showed the heart of the people that they were willing to rise up and take action against their oppressor. And yes, they lost. But I would rather lose my life fighting for the right of God than to have my life taken by a totalitarian government. It's not that you are doing something wrong. It's just you're not doing anything. You're not voting. You're not speaking out. You're sitting around your living room, around the TV, saying, that's terrible, that's terrible. You look at the headlines, that's terrible, and you're doing nothing about it. And we have become the body of Messiah that would rather curse the darkness than light a candle. Are you one of those that would rather curse the darkness than light a candle? Did you get out and vote in yesterday's primary? Probably not. But I consider it my biblical mandate to be an active citizen of the country in which I live and to exercise the rights granted to me by that citizenship. I voted for the candidates that were willing to commit to conservative values, to stand against these new policies. This is going to be the slate of candidates in November along with the presidential campaign, the midterm elections, that are going to set the tone for the next 2 years of the Biden administration. Are they going to continue to advance and have legislation passed where their focus is on forgiving student loans and environmental issues, in which the proclamation in this climate battle is that God is not sovereign to take care of the world that he created, that man has the power to destroy. I do not read in the Bible where global warming brings about the campaign of Armageddon. And so we who are believers must stand on the word of God. But it does say that false governments will rise up, false leaders will rise up. And the prophecy tells us to beware of those kind of leaders. But if we don't vote, how can we beware of those kind of leaders when they are getting elected into office by people who we are opposed to? Because our biblical worldview is in opposition to their philosophical worldview. Just a short story for you from Israel that has to do with a very important matter. Israel leaders make last-ditch effort to stop Biden from approving dangerous Iran deal. How could 20% of the body of Messiah not register to vote and cause this man to become president that was going to advance the cause of a nuclear Iran, which was an existential threat to the existence of Israel? And if you're a believer and you voted for him, then you voted against Israel. As the signing of a revised nuclear deal between Western countries and the Islamic Republic appears imminent, Israeli leaders are making a last-ditch effort to prevent it from happening. I call on President Biden and the American administration to refrain, even now at this last minute, from signing the agreement with Iran, alternate Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said in a statement Tuesday. This agreement will send approximately $250 billion to the Iranian terrorist administration's pockets and to its regional proxies, and will enable Iran to develop, install, and operate centrifuges with almost no restriction in a mere 2 years, he warned. $250 billion. Just like Obama delivering plane loads of cash, this administration is about to give $250 billion of our taxpayer dollars to fund terrorism. Throughout the past year, even it was very close, we successfully convinced our White House counterparts not to give in to Iranian demands. I hope this will remain the case. One way or another, the state of Israel is not a party to the agreement. Israel is not committed to any of the restrictions stemming from the agreement and will utilize all available tools to prevent the Iranian nuclear program from advancing, he concluded. Also on Tuesday, during a faction meeting of his National Unity Party, Defense Minister Benny Gantz said he was heading to the United States to influence the agreement. Times of Israel reported he plans to attend a series of meetings with U.S. defense officials later this week, the report said. Gantz said he was in touch with both the U.S. and countries in the region regarding the negotiations over the deal. We will do everything we can to influence the agreement, he said. On Monday, Prime Minister Yair Lapid told French President Emmanuel Macron that Israel opposes to a return to the Iranian nuclear deal, and if one is reached, Israel will not abide by it. The Prime Minister made clear to the President that Israel opposes a return to the deal and would not be obligated by such an agreement. Israel will continue to do everything to prevent Iran from attaining nuclear capability, Lapid's office said. Israel is prepared, without any support from any other country, to strike facilities in Iran. Will this bring about a Middle Eastern war? Is this the spark that's going to light the torch? It's going to bring about Bible prophecy like we've never seen before. It has to happen, but will it happen now? Is the prophecy in Jeremiah of Elam, which has not yet been fulfilled, of the destruction of Elam, which is in western Iran, will this be how that prophecy is fulfilled? Is that Israel doesn't strike Tehran, they strike Elam. These are the prophetic setups that we are looking at right now, even today. And of course, I have to go to a commercial break. It's that top of the hour, and we will join you on the other side right after these short announcements. We'll be right back.
We pray today's show blessed you as much as it did us, and hope you will join us weekdays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Replays of the show are available online at www.live365.com. Please email your questions and comments to Rabbi Eric at ignitinganation.com or on our social media platforms. Stay tuned for the second hour of Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. The phone lines are open at 850-660-9595.
To some people, the sound of a baby babbling doesn't mean much. But that's not necessarily true. By 6 months, they're combining vowels and consonants. By 9 months, they're trying out different kinds of sounds. And by 12 months, their babbling is beginning to take on some meaning. Especially if there's no babbling at all. Little to no babbling by 12 months or later is just one of the possible signs of autism in children. Early screening and intervention can make a lifetime of difference and unlock a world of possibilities. Take the first step at autismspeaks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, grown-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have any body to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
The program you are listening to is brought to you by Igniting a Nation, a 501c3 nonprofit ministry. We are 100% supported by your contributions. You can partner with us and support this program. our outreach in Kisii, Kenya, and our support of Israel. Visit us at www.ianbn.com and take advantage of access to thousands of hours of teaching. You can also donate there on our social media platforms. Your support is a blessing here, there, and everywhere. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls. 660-9595.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we talk about the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we are having a heated discussion about this coming election, about yesterday's primary, about the statistical data, supporting the fact that we have taken a complacent and apathetic position as the body of Messiah in regards to how this country is run. And I hear so many complain about the condition of the nation and the reports of gas prices and egg prices and poultry prices. And yesterday we talked about countries who were scaling back various fertilizers to cut back on crop production because it had environmental impact. This whole climate agenda is startling to me when I look at God's creation. And faced with impossible situation, Moses in the wilderness, there is no food to eat, and God sends down manna from heaven. And the people tire of eating the manna and begin to lament for the meat that they had in Egypt. And so with God's power, omnipotence, out of nothing, he was able to provide them with so much meat that they consumed so much that it came out of their nostrils. Can God not cleanse the air that he created? Yes, we are cutting down trees will cleanse the air, but that doesn't mean we have risen above the power of God. No, we should not be dumping chemicals into water supplies and poisoning people. And we see that sin played out in disease and cancer. But that's the wickedness of man. That is not the limitation of God. And God is not going to intervene into a wicked nation or a wicked world. He is moving towards the restoration of the kingdom because we as a people, all of us, are turning away from God. If half of the population, 167 million, self-identify as Christian, that's almost half the population of the United States. Should it not be more noticeable in the marketplace? Should we not be acting differently than the rest of the world? Should we not be a people set apart? Should we forget all that has been for us? Yes, I do this 24 hours a day. I've committed my life's work to this now. After 35 years in the corporate world, the last 25 years since I came to faith have been devoted to the Lord. And I listen to the conversations and I hear what people say and what they talk about. And I will speak to strangers and talk about the Word of God. But what puzzles me and amazes me about what's happening in America is that, and this is verified, I'm going to share this report with you, the American Worldview Inventory 2021, Release 7, What Americans Find Attractive About Marxism. You know, back in the 60s and the 70s, there were a lot of moves underfoot to introduce communism. Mao's Red Book. So much was being embraced as civil disobedience against the government that had gotten us involved in a war that we really had no business being in. I'm going to take a moment and take this caller while I have a break. Shalom, you're on the air with Rabbi Eric Walker. Welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Hey, good morning, Rabbi. Good to hear you this morning.
Hey, good morning,
Hey,
Myron. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. What you're talking about this morning, people like myself, holding back a lot of times and not speaking up and doing things. I tell you, the left, I guess you'd call it, has people intimidated to a degree and not speaking out because, you know, I had an encounter the other day with someone where I just made an off-the-cuff comment. I didn't think that much about it, and I got a little bit of pushback on it, but I took that as an opportunity to explain or something. And it ended up with I had a guy so mad at me. And then I go to, I guess, apologizing because I didn't mean to offend and all that. And there was no reasoning or anything with it. It's just and people will, family members will get mad. Church members will quit attending church if you say the wrong thing. So you got it's a real challenge for believers and people that, like myself, I'm a news junkie. I listen to, I guess, sometimes too much, but you know, like when you want to be informed and know things, but boy, you have to be careful in sharing. And I guess I'd like to hear you kind of comment on how you deal with some of that.
Look,
because I'm sure you encounter the same thing.
And I do, and we face this biblical model which shows us that the popular vote, the popular opinion, was what got people crucified and killed and subjugated to Rome. And Jesus stood up against, and it cost him his life, and the apostles stood up against, and it cost them their life. We have to be willing to count the costs. And I've spoken of this before, excuse me, that the average Christian in America who is born into Christianity knows nothing about counting the cost of becoming a Christian. I know what it's like, because when I accepted Jesus, I lost all of my Jewish family and the Jewish community and my right to citizenship in Israel. And I knew that going in, that when I became a public teacher and I started having works published and I had sermons being published, that my name would go on a list and there would be organizations that would come against me. And if you go on the web, you can see the organizations that will come against me by name. But I only take that as encouragement. If you've made that other person think, and they can defend as vigorously and as angrily as they want to defend their position, but you made them think. And if you planted just one seed, and that's all God's called us to be, is seed planters. We're not responsible for someone's salvation. We're responsible for sharing with them, for planting the seed. We're not responsible for converting somebody from being a liberal to a conservative just because we're conservatives. We can disagree and neither one of us be wrong. But in the direction this country is headed, the only approach I know to take is to ask people questions. And those questions are, if we're seeing food shortages now and the supply chain is supposedly fixed, what do you think it's going to be like in 3 or 4 more years when they outlaw certain fertilizers?
Yeah.
And we have to find a new way to fertilize our crops, and therefore crop production goes down, and 10% of American workers are farmers, and we're affecting their entire livelihood. Well, what direction do you think we're headed in if that's the case today, that they're already having an impact on that? And ask them the question, where do you think we're going to be headed? If you're complaining about a dozen eggs being $4.50 now when it used to be $1, how are you going to feel when a dozen eggs is $8?
Right. I had a lady yesterday complaining about the price of eggs in a grocery store. I was right there, and I said, well, I guess we're going to have to all get us some chickens. And I said, well, no, you got to feed the chickens. And so what do we do there? You know, she just walked away shaking her head.
You know,
yeah. And it's about, yeah, go ahead. There's about 40% of the people, at least, that have this mindset that, you know, this socialism thing and all is just wonderful, is just okay. And they're hard to hear any difference. But this point you're making about asking questions, that is, I'm sure, probably the best approach to it. That's what I should have done right there. Just say, well, what are we going to do when they're $6 or $8?
Right. We can have an agenda and a goal.
Yeah.
That we want that person to think differently. But the only way we're going to get them to think differently is to align ourselves with them in some fraternal way by opening up the dialogue and saying, you know, I'm as concerned as you are about this economy. What do you think we ought to do? Do you think we have the right people in office? Do you think that this climate change is that big a deal? You're a guy I go to church with. Do you not think God's big enough to handle the climate that He created? That we should ban every gasoline burning vehicle and transform this country into an electrical vehicle country, which is the mandate by, I believe, 2030. That's only 8 years away. And that means that you're going to have a charging station on every corner. And I mentioned this yesterday, that batteries contain caustic chemicals, that they haven't yet been able to find a way to create a battery with electrified water. I'm sure that there's going to be a way, and they're going to move towards that. But right now, you open up a battery, you're going to get burned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And how safe is that for the environment? Well, we're just not in a position to to adapt quickly. So I would be asking the person, well, what do you think? Do you think that this is a good plan? Do you think this is too aggressive a plan? What do you think we ought to be doing? Who do you think we ought to be putting in office? What do you think we ought to be doing as believers? Because a lot of this is opposed to God and God's word.
Yeah. I guess another place is at the gas pump. You can say, boy, I was in a good mood till I have to buy gas.
Right.
And I can remember $1.79. I sure like that better than near $4 or whatever it is.
Well,
I don't know. It's like
America doesn't seem to be affected to the point where there's an outcry. People are moaning and complaining, but they're not doing anything about it. And that's the problem that I have, is that there seems to be so much discontent, but people have become comfortable in resigning themselves to the fact that this guy in office is a puppet and the people pulling his strings are powerful and they've been in government forever and they're calling the shots and there's nothing we as the American citizens can do about that. Well, go back to 1776 and take that same attitude. The British Empire was powerful. The British Empire controlled everything, shipping, receiving, the colonies had no ability whatsoever to get supplies unless the mother country provided them. But yet, there were things that were so offensive, so provoking, that the pastors began to speak out to the people to say to them, how long are you going to live under this tyranny? They consider themselves to be God. And I will tell you, Washington, D.C. considers themselves to be God. And these professional politicians consider themselves to be God. And that is opposed to Scripture. There shall be no other gods before me. So when we have allowed this government to grow to the point where they control everything, it's time for us to take it back. And that means choosing our next leaders carefully, getting involved in the community, and encouraging our pastors, or giving us the opportunity to present, or having the candidates come in and be able to question them and hear their answers. Getting involved somehow in a dialogue so that we know where it's headed. Now, one of the problems has been is that we put people in office and then they change their position. What do? Well, in my opinion, the people that put them into office need to get back together again and begin the procedure of getting them out of office. That happens enough time, pretty soon these politicians are going to figure out, I can't just go lie my way into Washington and then do what I want and make money. Because once you get to Washington, you become a millionaire. You're given opportunities for wealth and for power that you can't even imagine, because corporations are funding all of these boondoggle trips and these cash gifts and so many benefits and stock and there's so many different ways they're being influenced, and we're doing nothing about it. We don't have a standard of ethics which is enforceable, because we have the inmates running the asylum, and that's what Washington.
Absolutely.
That's what Washington's become.
Yes, it is. I agree. Well, I just wanted to hear your comment on it. And that's a good approach to it, what you said. And this is the fear factor, though, for the most part, that keeps regular people from speaking out very much or saying too much, because they don't want to start a fight like I almost did that day. it was almost like the guy was just ready to attack me because he was so angry because I did not agree with his agenda that this, well, I'm not going to call him the president. This person was not at fault with any of these problems that we have. The gas prices, with the supply chains, everything was someone else's fault, because I didn't agree with that. Boy, he was fit to be tied. And that's, so you just have to be careful, I guess. And like you said, choose wisely, ask questions, and plant seeds the best you can, I suppose.
Well,
So that's
a great proverb that says that a kind word turns away wrath. And so we need to practice that in edifying and uplifting and encouraging others, that I do respect your opinion and I do respect the differences, but let's find some areas we agree on. Do you agree that we should be involved in these foreign wars? Do you agree that we should be changing Social Security? Do you agree that we call it an entitlement program when I worked for 50 years to pay into it? That wasn't how it was presented to us. It was an investment plan so that no matter whether I saved or didn't save, I would have at least something to carry me through my old age. There's some areas that you can agree on, and maybe that's where you start, is asking questions on things that you agree on. And then you begin to talk about those others, and you move into it, and you make it more of a relationship building than it is a confrontation.
Right. And that proverb is very true. I have actually used that over the years. And, you can almost see someone calm down when that's put into practice, that proverb you just stated there. That is good to keep in mind. Well, I appreciate you listening this morning or expounding on that for us. And we'll talk to you later. I got something else another story I wanted to run by you before I talk to you on the air, and I'll talk to you about that later. But good to hear from you this
morning. God bless you. Love to Carolyn, love to Seth, love to Charles and to Doris and the family.
Thank you, Father.
God bless you, my friend.
Bye.
All right, and that's what this program is all about, is the talking about and calling in and talking about situations. Yes, people are afraid. They're afraid of confrontation. They're afraid of being attacked. They're afraid of being labeled a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, an Islamophobe, all those things. But if God is for you, who can be against you? Every one of the disciples were ridiculed and persecuted. But that didn't stop them. That did not deter them. And so, are we looking for popularity? Well, you have a choice to be pleasing to God or pleasing to man, but you can maybe not be pleasing to both in certain situations. And in this political climate, things have to change. I've been fascinated with this concept of why so many people are embracing the key tenets of a Marxist worldview, including negative views of private property, individual economic success, and traditional moral values. According to new research from the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, America's increasing rejection of objective truth and loss of the biblical worldview has created a cultural context conducive to the growth of Marxist thought and practice. And in that context, many ideas reflecting the Marxist worldview may be unwittingly accepted by many Americans who otherwise would reject the label Marxist. The study found that about a quarter of the United States adults hold negative views of private property. Specifically, 27% believe that allowing people to own property facilitates economic injustice. And almost as many, 23%, believe that individual property ownership is bad for society. I don't understand the logic. Millennials ages 18 to 37 are far more likely than older adults to hold such beliefs, creating concern that shifting worldviews among younger Americans will continue to fuel the growth of support for Marxism and its offshoots, such as critical race theory in American culture. Remember, the vote age 18, the voting age is 18. So the millennials are now the new voters. Throughout the past decade, national surveys have trumpeted the substantial proportion of U.S. adults who claim they would prefer socialism to capitalism, typically somewhere to the 30 to 40% range. Millennials in particular have displayed an affinity for the Marxist-based political system. The new research from the CRC Director of Research, George Barna, identifies a dozen elements of the Marxist worldview that appeal to at least 1/3 of American adults, while fewer than 1% of American adults have adopted Marxism as their primary worldview. 10% consistently draw from the Marxist philosophy in their daily decision-making. The findings from the American Worldview Inventory also discovered that two of the central tenets of Marxism, claims of the harmful effects of marriage on society and the belief that people were originally good but became corrupted by society, are wildly rejected by Americans, rarely a dominant worldview. Overall, less than 1% of Americans have adopted Marxism as their dominant worldview. If that proportion seems low, keep in mind that there is no worldview among the 7 studied by the Cultural Research Center that has amassed a following that reaches double figures. The biblical worldview is the most widely embraced, but at 6%, it hardly has a commanding presence on or dominance in this country. The fact that syncretism, a customized blend of elements drawn from a spectrum of competing worldviews, is the dominant worldview among Americans, 88%, is indicative of the convoluted nature of people's intellectual, spiritual, and moral commitments. Now, that's not to say that everybody has to be the same, think the same, and that there's not room for a larger view than the constraints that we've placed on having a biblical worldview. Having a biblical worldview does not discount many things that people are opposed to. For example, in the area of land ownership, God established that I could go to work as a bond servant for a period of time, 6 years, 7 years, and at the end of that 7 years of working, I would receive my own land. That's a very fair and equitable system. I am not allowed to mistreat, I'm not allowed to abuse, I'm not allowed to do anything to bring harm to that person, but to bless them by fulfilling my commitment to them. It is by virtue of the increase in property values that many have been able to increase their offerings to charitable organizations that feed the hungry. You see, we have many problems that Marxism and communism have not addressed. Look at the starvation and the poor treatment of the North Koreans. Look at the starvation, the poor treatment, and the human rights violations of the People's Republic of China. Look at the oppression going on under the Russian influence of Vladimir Putin. Look at these dictatorships in Central and South America. Look at what's happening in nations that have taken on socialism. They failed economically because it's a system that doesn't work. But the message of it, the philosophy of it is lovely and beautiful and welcoming and beneficial to all, but the reality is not the case. And we have history to prove it out. But people don't want logic, they want to feel good. We're going to take a short break because we've hit that time. And we will be back after these brief announcements.
We'll be right back with more Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker right after this commercial break.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Okay, men, this is your time. Maybe you didn't choose this, but you're here now. You're going to go out there and be an all-star caregiver. It's up to you. So what are you going to do? You're going to go grocery shopping, cook, clean, be there emotionally and physically. You got to dig deeper. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments. Don't you forget about the pharmacy. No, you won't. Because that's what caregivers do. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. This is your time to show the world, your family, and yourself that you're tougher than tough. Now go out there and be the best caregiver this world has ever seen. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In the Garden of Eden, God spoke his first prophecy. Not much has been said or written about the eternal impact of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. What if every prophecy, and even Jesus' return, was tied to this prophecy and no one ever told you? Now you have a chance to read for yourself Rabbi Eric's latest book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy. Featured on Skywatch TV, this book is a must-read. Get your copy at Amazon or from Skywatch TV. And don't forget to order The Codist, Rabbi Eric's prophetic biblical thriller, exposing a diabolical plot to weaponize your DNA. And while you're at it, get his book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls at 850-660-9595.
Shalom and welcome back to this last half hour of today's live edition of Revealing the Truth, the Prophecy Edition. Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and encourage you, like Myron called, to call in and talk about this, because this is real. Is that people are afraid to speak up for fear of attack, and there are ways in which to enter into very effective and dynamic conversations without being confrontational. And the method I've used in witnessing, the method I've used in communicating ideas and getting to know people is to ask questions. And I like to ask questions because I don't know the answer. And that helps to educate me and helps give me a foundation of understanding that as to where that person is coming from. As we look at some crucial foundations of the Marxist ideology have developed a notable minority following within the United States. two of the central tenets of the philosophy have been adopted by about 1/4 of adults. The notion that allowing people to own property facilitates economic injustice is accepted by 27%. Slightly fewer, 23%, believe that individual property ownership is bad for society. So, in examining this goal that was, I guess, a part of the baby boomer generation, or for generations who were born in America, was home ownership gave you independence. Home ownership gave you security. Home ownership provided a roof over your head, a place to call home and raise your family. What's on the other side of non-home ownership, of government housing? Our government in its current state can't maintain a road, can't maintain the safety of a bridge, cannot provide the safety of human life in having a well-equipped and well-funded police community to deal with the lawlessness that goes on. And when we start getting into expanding the role of government, which is what this is all about, it is moving everything from the individual, from the community, from the county, from the state to the federal government, and having them be in charge of all of it. You'll wear the clothes that they tell you to wear. You'll live where they tell you to live. You'll buy the food they tell you to buy. Tell me what this government over the last 20, 25 years has done to build confidence in this 70-year-old man that we have a government that's capable of taking on any more responsibilities. When we just came through 2 years of COVID that was so totally mishandled, and the lack of proper information was just so totally mishandled. And that was done at the federal government level. So this Marxist view says that I'm going to trust the people in government. Well, how do they get into that position? Well, in other countries, they rose to power through fixed elections or through military coup. Excuse me. Is that what we want to see happen in America? We have a system that was created, a constitution, and every one of these principles denies my right my inalienable right, granted to me by God. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty means that I am not under the oppressive hand of a ruling party or ruling government. In the communist socialist world, they regulate morality. They regulate religion. In Islamic ruled countries, and the one example I can speak to is Malaysia, and I have one of my books has been published in Malaysia, is that Malaysia is about 90% Muslim. In order to be a practicing Christian, you must have permission from the government. In order to be a pastor, you must have permission from the government. And there are certain things you can say and do and certain travel that you have to be approved. and it's controlled by the government. So there is no freedom of religion, which was part of the founding fathers, that there should be no state religion. Well, in America, whether you believe it or not, the state religion is secular humanism. And it's being forced down the throats of every American. And in the communist countries, the socialist countries, the state religion is the government. Look at the persecution of the church in China. Excuse me. Look at the persecution of the church historically in the former USSR. Look at the lessons that they learned in 1776 about the Black Robe Regiment, knowing that key influencers, religious leaders, could turn the people against the government, and therefore their power would be corrupted. One-fifth of adults, 18%, believe that success is best described as living a healthy and productive life, unencumbered by economic oppression. A similar number, 17%, believes that the personal accumulation of money and other forms of wealth are practices that demonstrate how unfair society can be to those who work hard yet are unable to get ahead. My father started out as a stock boy at Macy's and devoted the entirety of his life to Macy's and to then their store in Pittsburgh, and went from a stock boy, and when he retired 48 years later, he retired as a vice president. He didn't have a college education. He barely had a high school education. But through hard work, loyalty, integrity, and devotion, and doing the jobs that nobody else wanted to do, he rose up through the ranks of the corporation. People coming to America over our borders still consider America to be the land of opportunity. Why are they leaving the socialist countries they're leaving if that system is so much better than our system? By contrast, the biblical worldview, starting with the Ten Commandments, asserts that we should not steal or covet the private property of others, that greed and envy are equally sinful, and that work that produces wealth to pay for food and shelter is an important and necessary part of life and human flourishing. Those who are blessed with wealth should voluntarily give to help the poor, but the poor are not entitled to steal private property from the rich and should not envy their wealth. Marxist ideology denies the existence of God or a living deity in favor of vesting authority in government and social elites. Although a slight majority of adults in the United States, 52%, still believes in the existence of some type of transcendent supernatural being, the most rapidly growing religious segment of the population, 34%, contends that they don't believe, know, or care whether God exists. This expanding niche labeled the don'ts is providing a spiritual foundation that is increasingly comfortable with Marxist thought and practice. There are a variety of other religious and philosophical beliefs that tens of millions of Americans embrace that are compatible with Marxism. For example, the majority's rejection of the existence of absolute or objective moral truth is a case in point. Similarly, roughly half of adults believe in evolution, and the increasingly widespread doubts about the reliability of the Bible facilitate alternative sources of moral guidance and lifestyle boundaries. This shift in religious and philosophical beliefs away from God and biblical truth creates a climate conducive to broader acceptance of Marxist ideas. It has been my personal experience that those that have a leaning towards the Bible not being inerrant tend to embrace the doctrine and the dogma and the rule books of their denomination more than they embrace the Bible. We see that in traditional Judaism, that they're more willing to embrace the Talmudic interpretation of the Torah than the Torah itself in many cases. It's the opinion of the rabbis. So if the rejection of the existence of an absolute or objective moral truth is one of the foundations of Marxism, then many of you, even many of you who go to church on Sunday, subscribe to a Marxist view when you deny the infallibility of God, the sovereignty of God. Now listen, I'm not coming to you as someone who has not lived in the world, that grew up as a pastor's kid and went to seminary and was called at 4 or 5 years old. I came to faith at 45 years old after spending the first part of my life working in corporate America. But I believe in the power, the infallibility, the sovereignty of God. And I have evidence, solid, rock hard, irrefutable evidence, not only of his existence, but of his miracles, of his power, of his prophecies, of his word coming to pass. And all of this is tied in together with that. All of this is part of the end time sign, of the rise in lawlessness, of apostasy, of the tickling of the ears, of the great falling away. And so if you're going to fall away, you're going to fall away to something. And it seems that America is falling away towards socialism. It seems to be the loudest voice. And conservative Christians are coming under attack for their conservative perspective. But if there's 167 million of us, and I understand that a large portion of that is not committed to the inerrant Word of God or to a biblical worldview. When that began to change, America began to change. And when we stopped maintaining a biblical worldview, and we began to redefine right and wrong, and we can go back and we can tell you really the turning points in the redefinition of what sex is, in the redefinition of marriage, in the redefinition of birth, in the redefinition of male and female. All those things are based on a society that does not have a moral compass that's fixed on God. And I make no apology. And yes, I was that hippie. Still believe in many of the tenets of love and embracing your neighbor, and they're all biblical. There's nothing that Jesus said or did that would say that having a love mentality, a peace mentality, harmony and unity mentality as opposed to the teachings of Messiah. In fact, it's led many, 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 many to the Lord who were hippies at the time, who were anti-government, anti-establishment. But imagine America moving towards a government-controlled society. You and I will have lost our voice. And think of the dire consequences of us losing our voice. That means the message of salvation will not go forth. And the government will control your speech. And under a totalitarian, communist government or socialist government, you could be arrested for preaching the gospel. Does that seem extreme? No, it's going on in countries all over the world. We're just not paying attention to it. Over the past 2 decades, Americans have been abandoning biblical morality. Many common moral choices in the United States these days are consistent with Marxist ideals. 2/3 of adults, 68%, say that sexual relations outside of marriage are morally tenable. Given the Marxist dogma that marriage is a form of sexual and economic oppression, unfettered sexual expression fits the Marxist framework. Half of U.S. adults believe that having an abortion because their partner left and taking care of the child would therefore be difficult is also morally reasonable because Marxism does not value human life, and prioritizing children over the state is counterproductive to the Marxist vision. Abortion is viewed in that framework as a useful option. And more than 4 out of every 10 people, 43%, believe that lying to protect one's best interest or reputation is morally acceptable. Marxism, of course, does not support the idea of moral truth, so personal deceptions are accepted as a way of life. This is the consequence that we will face as a nation if we, as the Bible believers, do not take a stand, first of all, to register to vote. That's the least you can do, is not just register, but to get out and vote. Had the believers gotten out and voted in the last election, the result would have been different. That is an absolute proven fact. But because of the complacency of saying, oh, he's not going to lose, that other guy can't win, well, the other guy won. And we have midterm elections coming up in November. And I want to encourage you that if you have not voted or registered to vote, as a believer, it is incumbent upon you to be a good citizen of the kingdom of God. When the Bible tells us to subject ourselves to the local authorities, our local authority is this: the Constitution of the United States. That is our local authority. And if you want to protect and defend, as God instructs us to do, to submit to the local authority, then we must vote in line with what the Constitution granted us, which was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not a government-controlled, totalitarian, telling you what to eat and where to live and what you can and cannot do. That's not freedom. That's persecution. And coming from a family that was persecuted in Eastern Europe, I can tell you that there's no luster to persecution. There's no joy in persecution. There is not one person confined to China that would not want to get out. As believers, it's incumbent upon us to be good citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And yes, the day will come when a leader will rise up and there will be a one world government. But as long as I have breath, I will speak to the believers and encourage you as strongly as I possibly can, admonish you as strongly as I possibly can to do your part as a citizen of this great country, to keep the Bible and a biblical worldview in place so we can stop the deep dive into the pit of hell that this country is headed in. And it's up to you and me to change the course. And we've run out of time. So I want to leave you with a blessing. From Numbers chapter 6, verse 22, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons, this is how I want you to bless the children of Israel." He goes on to say, "In this way I will put my name on you and I will bless you. Please bow your heads to receive the Aaronic benediction. Yivarecha Adonai v'yismerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'kunecha, Yisar Adonai panav alecha v'yasimlecha shalom." The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance toward you and give you his peace. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus our Messiah. Amen and amen. Stay tuned for these brief announcements, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow morning for the next edition of Revealing the Truth. The Revelation study will continue. We'll see you then. Shalom.
The program you are listening to is brought to you by Igniting a Nation, a 501c3 nonprofit ministry. We are 100% supported by your contributions. You can partner with us and support this program, our outreach in Kisii, Kenya, and our support of Israel. Visit us at www.ianbn.com and take advantage of access to thousands of hours of teaching. You can also donate there on our social media platforms. Your support is a blessing here, there, and everywhere.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Thank you for listening to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Join us tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central Time and give us a call at 850-660-9595. Full downloadable versions of all the teachings are available at ignitinganation.com. Don't forget to listen 24/7 for Revealing Life, Revealing the Bible, Revealing Prophecy, Revealing the Gospels, and more of Revealing the Truth. Download Igniting a Nation or listen on iHeartRadio. Until we see you right back here tomorrow, Shalom.